You have permission to record, right?
What do you mean? It's recording. Is that what we're trying to make sure is happening?
Okay, because last time there was the whole thing about, like, I thought it was automatically recording and it wasn't.
Oh.
If I hit the record button, it tells me I don't have permission to hit the record button.
Yeah, it's been odd for me a couple times, but I'm logged in to my account, but it looks like the recording started, so we're good.
Okay.
Are those Sunlight digs? At the Sunlight Foundation office, Andrew? Totally. Nice. New digs. My hair looks crazy.
You look great. You hanging out with that list of Army food offerings back there?
Bleak. It's bleak times.
I think it's pretty amazing that you sit on like very corner of your actually like fairly expansive apartment when you have these meetings.
He has a pretty good view of the rest of the apartment.
That's true.
I figured give it 1 or 2 minutes to see if anybody else shows up, but probably not, since all the people writing code are gone for one reason or another right now.
So we can ask this question then, unless it's going to be a long conversation. I screwed up. I should have asked you this a long time ago, Nick, and many times failed to. But regarding employment with Public Lab, are there any restrictions? I know for sure that there are none with Climate Central or with Packard. And the main restriction is do people need to be Americans in any way?
Just to be clear, this is for the web monitoring project manager position.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll ask.
Okay. Because yeah, I mean, in talking with Packard, my guess was that there wouldn't be, and there aren't, and that they can't say anything about it. So the question is, yes, totally separate from a relationship with Packard's Public Lab administration.
Yeah, is it okay if I talk to Shannon about it on Monday, or should I just send an email now? Is it y'all need to know by the end of the week?
I think it depends on maybe Rob knows. If we're ready to post things before that, then maybe that'd be nice, but I'm not sure we are, so I don't know if other folks can weigh in.
I think one step before we were going to post it, separate from where we were going to post it, is we would need to approve some potential amount for post. Like something probably needs to go to a steering committee, right? So it'd be nice to happen on Friday.
The steering committee, I mean, if Nick can weigh in, or totally if they understand differently, approved like that first proposal to go through with the hire, which includes like basically going all the way through the hire. I guess it'd be nice to clear the final hire, like once we have a final pool, but I don't think the steering committee felt like we had to go back to them each step of the way. And that was supposed to be cleared up in that original proposal. If Nick or Tully feel differently, they can say so. But.
Felt like we were given discretion once the committee was formed to follow through on the hire.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's also but it is also nice just to update the steering committee.
Yeah, no, updates are totally, I totally support updates. I think we should give those basically every step of the way, but as you know, Nick, getting approval from everyone takes often a lot more time than just providing an update. So that's, the question is, should we get thumbs up? But
the steering committee is also non-meeting, but
that's also true.
So could be worth just posting something on Slack saying this is what we're doing. Any feedback?
Yeah, that would be great. In terms of the budget, okay, we can talk about those things after. Sorry, now I'm destroying the meeting, Rob.
No worries. There's even a place on the agenda for this, because I'm actually ahead of it this time. Does anybody want to take notes in that notes doc? Okay, thanks. And yeah, so I guess get started. Kevin and Dan won't be here because they're both out for various reasons. I think everybody knows that, but so yeah. Any important updates you wanted to give from the analyst perspective, Toli?
Nothing, no real updates since last time. Maya and I just checked in with almost all the analysts just for a one-on-one meeting, just to make sure everyone's getting attention and asking for feedback in terms of how we're running the group and if we can be doing something better. People seemed relatively, no one had major concerns. Some people said, well, like some of my issues will probably be resolved when we move to the new software platform. But it seems like people are quite excited. And I'll just say a quick note that one of our longtime analysts, Eric Nost, is very interested in doing some more systematic analysis of how pages pertaining to climate change have been changed, and we're going to start talking about different metrics that we can use in terms of particular words that we want to look for, and we've been talking about this for some time, but actually formalizing it and saying, of a set of pages, let's say, pick up 500 pages or something that pertain to climate change across agencies, and then compare 2 time points before inauguration and like in June, and say what fraction of pages are down, how many pages were down and came back up, fraction of like language change. So that's going to be ongoing. We'll fill you guys in on that, and potentially we'll need maybe to get some guidance from the developers on that in terms of the diffing.
Yeah, I was going to ask, have he and Janak or you and Janak talked about that at all? Because I know a big portion of his Summer of Code project is supposed to be focusing on like things that we can key off of for filtering and that sort of stuff.
So Janak actually reached out to me to talk about he needed some diffs that he wanted to look at. But we haven't talked about this explicitly. I guess we're not talking about filtering in particular right now. It may be coming up with, but it'll be relevant. We're thinking more of a little bit more of a manual analysis of doing something like an analyst would look at like 500 diffs and classify them. But if we had filtering to go along with that, would be really nice. We just don't want to rely on the.
Well, but on the other hand, that work should set up the filtering as well.
Yeah.
So it just should
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the idea. So we've had like 1.5 hour conversation about it, so nothing's really happening, but we'll definitely loop in the right people. Is there a good forum that he goes to, or should I just reach out to him?
I mean, he's on the web monitoring Slack channel and seems to be reasonably responsive there. Otherwise, reach out directly.
He hasn't been at these meetings, but
I think
Yeah.
that's mostly the time difference. But
Well, we picked this time so he could make it. So I don't know.
Just to say, like, it would be good to maybe loop in a mentor when you talk to them if you want to reach out privately, but I would start first in a public channel. And so I think right now Mike is sort of covering in because that mentoring team is Kaela, Mike, and Dan.
Okay. As far as dev side stuff, Kevin is gone for 2 weeks, and Dan is also gone semi-indefinitely. So I'm trying to catch up and finish all the work that they left, most of the way done, but not quite there, and get it merged in. We've got some of that work got done yesterday. And I'm trying to finish Dan's diffing display work on the front end so that we can demo it tomorrow for the analysts. And so that's the main thing I'm working on. And then looks like I'm going to have to circle back and do some of the cleanup I keep delaying doing on the Versionista stuff, since Versionista suddenly showed up after months of our thing running just the same and went, so have to alleviate that.
Is there anything like, is the script just like need an update? You're not sure what it is yet?
Well, so there's a bunch of parts to it, various things that we can do. There's an agenda item for after everybody's updates to talk about that more. So let's talk about it then. Just, I got to balance that versus getting all the other front end stuff done so we can actually get it done and be able to have it for tomorrow. Yeah, so I think that's all I really have for dev updates. And there's nobody else doing dev stuff to say anything. So, Don and Matt, anything from y'all?
Not on dev for me right now. I guess on the that side.
Okay. Nick just asked if it would be possible to invite some steering committee members and such to the demo. That's fine with me. I mean, it's more up to Toli since he runs that meeting, and it's mainly a meeting for the analysts. So I don't know if there's time or space for that.
Oh, for the steering committee to join for the demo? Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll be happy to send that around and invite people. And I think we can record the demo as well, in case others can make it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not entirely sure it'll be like that meaningful. It's not like a long thing, right? We're talking like a 10 or 15 minute thing. If people want to show up, that sounds great.
Yeah,
I don't want to overstate what it is so that people feel like they need to show up or something like that.
yes, I would agree. It's kind of rough, so I don't know that it will be like a huge thing, but if people want to show up, that's cool.
Yeah, I was just noticing like some confusion from the steering committee, like about what was going on. So I thought I noticed how well the demo at like Archivers did together helped clarify those issues. Just saw it as an opportunity to create some common understandings across the organization.
I mean, yeah, I think it's worth clarifying. This is like a demo of a particular UI, but this won't be a demo of the entire analyst workflow. That stuff has been recorded though, and there's several hours of it available that is on all sorts of public channels. So anyone on the steering committee should feel free to watch that anytime. But that's like 2.5, 3 hours worth of stuff there. So
maybe we can just post a quick demo and then also links to the workflow afterwards and let people know.
Pat?
So just related to organizing things, which I think we might have just passed, but for what it's worth, I realized I'm in New York right now. I came visiting and I realized I didn't know who was all, I just don't know where people are. So if there are web monitoring people who are in New York and there's interest in any way convening a larger group and trying.
I can't understand almost anything you're saying. I'm sorry.
Sorry, it's a very loud co-working space. Is this a little better? Or should I just, okay. So I'm just in New York for the week, so I've been a little MIA, but was part of, I just realized that I haven't known who all is in New York, just because everyone's just a face on my computer. I sometimes forget where people are. So if there is anyone from web monitoring who would be interested, who's in New York and would be interested in attending Frog Hack Night, it felt like a really interesting environment and lots of potentially opportunity to pull in new community contributors who are developer savvy. If that's what we need. It just felt like a good energy there. So just putting it out there, they're very receptive. I think Brendan is going to try to make it out on behalf of Archivers if he can. So yeah, if anyone else is in New York or knows of anyone who I should track down who's even tangentially aligned with the web monitoring project.
I mean, I think Dan normally is, but not right now. Any updates also, I guess, from anybody who would know on DataKind stuff? Matt?
I got an email last night, and actually totally didn't have time to read it, so I'm just quickly looking at it right now. They're saying that they're going to announce the projects next month, and they are moving things along. No work needed from us, so nothing particular.
Okay, thanks. So I guess moving on to the Versionista stuff. So this morning, I'm not sure if it was Nick or somebody else who got an email from them that was a little bit alarmist, but basically said, you're slamming our servers every 3 days, please stop. Which I think is kind of funny because we've been doing that for about 4 months now, and this is the first they've said anything about it. But so I've had kind of backburnered a project to rewrite that every 3 days part to just hit our database instead, because we actually hit them every 30 minutes, and that's what builds up our database. And the every 3 days one is the one that builds the CSV for all the analysts. But we could do that from our own database as well now. I just haven't done it because hitting Versionista meant I could use the exact same script as the every 30 minutes one. I just tweak, the time frame. But we can just not hit them at all for the every 3 days one, which is a bigger scrape. It takes like 45 minutes as opposed to like 1 to 5 minutes, which I think is why we got the complaint, because it lasts for a little while longer. So today I got to put together some language for Rebecca to send back to him that's clear about what we're doing and why, and if they could do anything nicer for us that helps both sides. But then I got to find some time in the next day or two before the next 3-day run goes to try and rewrite it to use our database instead of theirs. And I don't know if there's anything worth adding that I missed or that I'm failing to summarize. Anybody else who knows about this? Nick?
Would it be easier if I just added you, Rob, to I loop you in on the email chain, so it's not Rebecca, you ventriloquizing through Rebecca, and would that be easier or no?
It might be. I don't know. You tell me. I don't know, like whether he's had a rotating cast of characters from us, and whether that, like I can speak more specifically to issues, but also is probably helpful for him to not just be like, now I'm talking to somebody else, now I'm talking to somebody else, and so, I don't know. You tell me, because I have not talked with him ever before. How that balances out. I'm fine if you want to just connect me. Otherwise, I'll write some notes for Rebecca to write nicer for him.
I mean, Nick, Rebecca, and I are all on this email. I guess the question is, will it be? I kind of support the direct communication because I think that'd be easiest. But then I'm also wondering if it'll alarm him that there's someone new being added. But yeah. I mean, this is what we were worried about a long time ago, and I guess it just happened.
Well, it looks like he's saying in the email, if you tell us what you're doing, maybe we'll be able to make a feature for this. But we actually asked him to do that 4 months ago, and then I think there were crickets. So
let's not.
Yeah.
I don't think we should go down that road. He's said 10 times that he would make us features, and hasn't. So we shouldn't engage him and say, oh, you can help us do this. But I'm imagining that was never your plan, Rob, anyway. So.
Well, what I was going to say is I was just going to say, oh, since you said that, here's exactly what we're trying to get. If you could build us a simple API to do that, that'd be great, and it would help both of us. But at the same time as writing that in the letter, I wasn't going to expect any actual motion there.
I'm worried that he's going to tell us that violates his terms of service and cancel our subscription.
Well, we're already scraping for that data anyway, and I don't think it helps anybody for us to not own up to exactly what we're doing. because he obviously sees the activity, and we should just be clear, like, here's what we're doing, here's why. We are pulling out the data that we're using your service to gather, that we're paying for in order to do analysis. We're still using the UI of your service for people to look at the changes and everything too. You know, we're just trying to add some tooling on top of it. And I don't think that's that outrageous. And if he comes back and says that's a violation of our terms of service, he may as well come back and say it's a violation of our terms of service for you to scrape us like this anyway, without us explaining why anyhow. So I don't think it hurts. I think it behooves us to explain exactly what we're doing and why. Matt?
I'm just going to agree with that and say that, like you said, he already knows what we're doing. We already have a cease and desist letter. So we have, I think, very little to lose.
I guess it depends. Like, if we're just going to say we're basically exporting stuff onto a spreadsheet, a Google spreadsheet, I think that's fine. That's one thing. If we tell them we're like building a database and imply in any way that that database will source a future UI that hasn't got anything to do with Virginista, I worry he'll basically understand that we're planning to move off the service and kick us off right now.
Well, I wasn't planning to address anything that he did not address in his letter, which is I was not going to address the every 30 minutes slow trickle.
Okay, yeah.
I'll just leave that unsaid because he didn't bring it up.
Right. I think that makes sense if we're just saying like, oh, we're exporting things to Google Sheets, like CSVs, things like that. And that doesn't seem like an issue. Yeah, so I agree.
Okay. Well, I'll put together those notes for Rebecca. So that's kind of my action item for right now today. Anything else with this that we should make sure of? Cool. Oh, Nick.
Sorry. And I think y'all covered this, but we don't, other than like them canceling our subscription, we don't have any like liability here, do we? Okay. Like legal liability.
I mean, we never had a lawyer read their terms of service. I just like looked through it, and I think I asked other people to. I'm not sure if anyone else did. It's really vague. It's in no way explicitly even banning this. It actually just basically doesn't mention this kind of thing. And I think my recollection, although we should look again, I think it'd be worth it. Feel free, someone else to, I'll do it today as well, is that I think the only thing that can happen is that you can be banned from using their service. Like it didn't talk about anything else. Unless we're doing like copyright thing, but we're not. I don't think we're doing anything that can violate the statute.
Matt?
Just it's unlikely that they have any kind of intellectual property over the images themselves. I don't see how that could be possible, although I'm not a lawyer. And so and we have no money. So, you know, what's in it for them beyond canceling our services, it's hard to see. Unless they like work with the customers.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we should start the letter off with an apology anyway. I mean, it wasn't our intent to slam them in any way that was a problem. You know, so if we're causing that, you know, was never anybody's goal here. So there's no reason not to say sorry for that.
I think it makes sense to apologize, but I do think we should also acknowledge that probably he's exaggerating something that he just noticed, because A, he's saying it was just with Rebecca's account, not mine, which is not right, and B, he never noticed this until now. And unless there was some error with the script, I imagine nothing would change, right? So
yeah, this.
I mean, with apologizing, I don't think we should make it like we just cut his leg off or something. Like, I think he just realized that we were doing something that he didn't like, that probably wasn't affecting his servers at all, and then realized he could tell us to stop, essentially.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's no reason not to be nice about it. I think it's fine. All right. So, what was the next thing? Internet Archive stuff. So Nick wanted to talk a little bit about this and a couple other cost issues which are next on the agenda. So I don't know if you want to kind of introduce this, Nick.
Sure. I mean, I think I'm probably the least well versed in these issues, so I don't know if I should be introducing it. But I guess Michelle dropped into the channel and raised a lot of really raised an understanding of how we had misunderstandings across, I guess, Rob and Dan about like what the value of PageFreezer was. And so I just was also wondering if that we're discussing the movement of web monitoring to be based upon Internet Archive, and so there's a little bit of back and forth about the benefits and the drawbacks of that move, and so I just wanted to have them sort of more clearly in one place, if that's possible. So I don't know if I should be. I think people are A, more involved in PageFreezer, and B, more involved in Internet Archive, and C, more involved in actual development of the software. So those three angles would be really helpful.
Yeah, I guess I would say for my part, so we have the obvious. So we have like two. So I would start with like PageFreezer and IA as a thing, which is mostly a thing that is an alternative to Versionista as a source for data, and they're both important and valuable to us from the perspective of they solve a cost problem we have with Versionista, which is it costs us a lot of money every month, and we would like to not have that overhead because we don't have good budgeting for it. But also that Versionista doesn't give us real great data. There's a lot of pages that we track on there, particularly PDFs and some other things that incidentally get picked up, that Versionista will tell us there was a new version on a certain date, but it won't store or allow us to retrieve the actual content of that version. So we can't do comparisons, and it can't do comparisons for us. And so there's not a whole lot of value to having that historic it changed information. So a lot of PDFs, it doesn't, most other kinds of files that aren't HTML or PDF, it just doesn't save. If a file is large, like more than a megabyte, it just doesn't save it. It also doesn't give us a lot of the headers and other parts of the request. So one of the things in our meeting with the Internet Archive last week that Dan brought up was asking if it was possible to get the full content of the response from Internet Archive, which means not just the content, the body of the response, but the headers and all the sort of metadata that the server sends down, because those are meaningful. They hold information about whether what you received is the actual content you asked for, or if it's information about an error that happened while you asked for the content. So like 404, like page not found, or like 500, like the server exploded. And so it didn't give you the content you asked for or whatever. Like the headers hold that information, tell us whether that's what the page is. And we can sort of kind of get that from Versionista, but not super reliably. And all the other kinds of headers besides that error code, we can't get from Versionista at all. So there's a lot of like missing information or holes in the data we get from Versionista. And both PageFreezer and our archive give us all of that much more reliably and much more completely. So it's cost and like quality of data that we want to move off of Versionista for. And then, so I think the main issue with PageFreezer really is that its cost is has become exorbitant. I think the belief originally was that we had some credits from Google. PageFreezer would install their stuff into like our Google Cloud, and it would be great, and everything would be gravy. The PageFreezer install is big enough, both in compute time, but mostly in data storage, that it burned through all the Google credits we had, like gone. And we've been able to get a little bit more, but there's no sustainable, repeatable way for us to keep getting that level of credit. And the amount of storage PageFreezer will need is only going to slowly increase over time. So we have kind of a hard problem there that we need to, like PageFreezer is just becoming something we can't handle in terms of costs. But also on the Internet Archive side, there's a lot of benefits there that make it attractive, which is we're very philosophically aligned with them, and they are with us. They're excited about helping us. We're excited about like being associated with a public archival project like Internet Archive. We can potentially use it in some ways as our canonical storage instead of other stuff, because it is itself about being a public archive. So we don't have to also take on that role. And there's just a lot more potential flexibility there because they're interested and excited and happy to work with us. So that's my understanding of the overall situation there and how I see the various forces involved for those three pieces. But I don't know if Dawn or Matt or Andrew or Toli have anything to add there. Dawn?
I have a question. So, if other people kind of have context that they want to add, I can go after that. I will ask my question. I actually am just curious whether using IA is like maybe technically feasible to do it at the pace that web monitoring requires. To me, that seems like the biggest block. So I'm wondering how far you've gotten in that conversation, because they don't really guarantee some sort of like pace of crawl about when they'll revisit a page. And so they have options for like saving in snapshots and stuff like that. But to do that at the scale that PageFreezer data is, like, so I guess I'm wondering like how you would see that reshaping what the web monitoring project is able to do in terms of monitoring snapshots, because it might be like once every couple months instead of once every 3 days.
We definitely brought that up on the call that we had last week. And basically what they said is they would probably be able to step it up for the pages we care about at the scale we're at right now. At the scale where we want to ultimately go, that might actually be like a meaningful impact on their resources. And like, we also didn't have a huge amount of time to talk about it. So there's question marks there about like how far we can go with it. And Andrew has a bunch more to add, I think.
No, I think there are question marks, but I think just to clarify, like, we wouldn't be using some like public or pay service from them. We would have a special relationship with them, which he made clear that they already have with plenty of organizations. So it wouldn't be like the sort of uncertainty that you're referring to, Don, wouldn't be an issue. Like, they would tell us how often that they were going to scrape the pages that we want to scrape. Maybe they couldn't do it every week because it would just be too much for them, but maybe they do it every 2 or 3 weeks. Like, there wouldn't be any unknowns surrounding that. We would have like an agreement with them.
Yeah, so one of the things Mark mentioned is that they have an existing program that mostly works with like museums and other public institutions where they, basically they archive particular pages on a schedule on a request, which is sort of what we're looking for. So they can just use that same infrastructure. It's separate from Archive It. It's a for-pay service, which I guess is one of the things that helps support them. So we would sort of be reusing that same infrastructure they have for that, to do this sort of work.
I think Archive It is also a paid service.
Yeah, actually, Rob, I thought, maybe I got this wrong. I thought this was the not paid service. Archive It is actually a for-pay service, but I could be getting that wrong.
I could be getting it wrong too. I'm not 100% clear on that part.
So I think, the possibility, this is sort of where we started. We always kind of wanted to work with the IA. So to make it go in that direction is still, in my view, the best of all possible worlds. I think there are some challenges still. And one of them I think we really need to keep our eye on is that there are data egress costs for moving out of Google Cloud. So we're burning through this money that Jen actually hasn't allocated yet right now every week. And at some point, if we run out of money, we may just have to, I don't know, we decide to switch to IA, but we don't have the money to move the data, and then we lose that whole data store, and that would suck. So
you're talking about one-time data egress, though,
the
right?
One-time data egress, yeah.
In a worst case scenario, I'll pay for one time. That's not even that expensive, right? Like, the one-time data egress from there shouldn't be that costly. That's not.
I think it's pretty costly. I don't remember the numbers. Maybe Dawn had her hand up for that or something else.
I was just going to say that the issue is more like where would it be moved to? Like to me, that would also be a question because we're kind of getting to the point where it's not cheap to store the amount of data that's on there.
Right. I was just saying, like the concern Matt was saying that it would get trapped or something. I think like we could get it out. Like what we don't want to do, and this is what Rob and Dan were commenting on last week at some point, was like constantly have Page Freezer running, but egressing data every week or something. That might be bad.
Yeah, and I think there was some conversation about this on Slack, but I think that the important thing I would like to do here or very soon is make a call on Page Freezer. Because if we're just not going to continue with using Page Freezer, we should shut it off sooner rather than later so it stops incurring those costs. And any leftover Google credits we can put towards other things, right? Because we still have 2 services operating in Google Cloud that are not Page Freezer related. There's a superset install that Sonal set up, which may or may not be going away because Pat did some work to figure out how to run that on Heroku. But then we also use Google Cloud Storage, which is cheaper than the type of storage Page Freezer uses, as a one-for-one copy with all the Versionista stuff we're archiving and storing in Amazon S3, right? So we have 2 copies of everything. We've got it all in S3 and we've got it all in Google Cloud Storage. So we would like to be able to continue having those 2 copies. And if we have more funds left over to make that last longer until we can find a more sustainable way to pay for it, awesome. So the sooner we shut off Page Freezer and stop having that cost, the longer that runway is. At the same time, if we can turn off Page Freezer, we can take all the stuff stored in it and move it into Google Cloud Storage, which will be cheaper than its current storage, and then we don't lose it all. I'm not sure what the total cost of that would be. It's not 100% clear because we haven't done a total inventory of the number of objects, which matter when you move to cloud storage as opposed to hard disk space. It's not just the number of bytes, but it's the number of bytes and the number of actual individual objects. So it's a little bit more complicated. It would take a little bit of work to do, but shouldn't be too huge a deal. But yeah, we should probably make that call sooner rather than later. Unfortunately, like Dan is kind of out, and I was, before kind of waiting on him as the voice of the person who's done way more work with the Page Freezer install and with the Page Freezer folks, since I have done very little. Andrew, did you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that's the call we have to make, and I just want to say a couple of things I'm thinking in terms of setting up that call are, if we're in a dire situation, we could decide to be comfortable with a gap in our archiving data, but obviously we all don't want that, and I would say because we've had such good archiving through Page Freezer until now, that would be sad. So it would be nice, so if we decide we don't want to have such a gap, which, I mean, we certainly all don't want to, and we might do it if we have a worst case scenario, then the decision to move off Page Freezer would be based on at least 2 things: the costs, if we can get them down low enough or something, or we can find funding, and then if we can't, can IA cover right now, essentially, or right when we decide to move off, what Page Freezer is doing, even if that archive isn't all in the same place, even if it's all not netted together yet, just knowing that it is being archived will mean that in the future we can make sure we do net it together. And so we've talked about the cost a lot. We've talked a lot less about whether IA can get started because we only talked with Mark last week, and then I didn't write those notes until yesterday or the day before. So, but the one thing I'll say is, what we never really did was talk with Page Freezer about this that I know of yet, and we keep saying we should get on a phone call. And I think one thing that Michael Reddick sort of said way back in January 19th or whenever we first talked with him is that he was kind of committed to covering the costs. And it could be that he doesn't realize this is actually like something we can't handle right now, and that we should just say that to him. I'm not sure that's ever been said. I don't think he ever said, like, I will pay $5,000 a month. He was never that specific, but his general premise for starting the whole arrangement was that he wanted to cover in-kind services. Now, this is being done not on his own servers, so maybe he sees this as different, but it's probably something we should say.
Sure. I think approaching it is fine. That is not how I remember his communications, which I'll say I have not looked at recently. But what I remember him saying is, we'd like to offer you, a crawler and an API, and these are the resources you're going to need. That's how I remember it. And that's,
So it did get to that point, and that's definitely the part where like you were in and you were doing through the calculations. What I'll say is in the very beginning, he actually anticipated that this would all be run on his servers. And he was never asking for us to pay for that. In fact, I think explicitly in the very beginning, we said like, we don't have money. So you're right. Several weeks after that starting point, when he sort of realized, no, he sort of presented it to us as he wasn't sure that he could safely protect his data. Maybe in reality, he also didn't want to cover the cost. So maybe the costs were a part of that. And we just never were told that. But what I'll say is, I don't view him as someone who has put his foot down and said, like, I will never pay for this. And so I think it might be worth, especially if we're saying to him, like, we like Page Freezer, we want to continue working with Page Freezer, we just can't. Maybe he'll be like, oh. And I mean, this is like a I don't know, at least million, if not tens of $1 million company. So in theory, $5,000 a month isn't absurd for him. But I'm just suggesting we say it to him, not that we like demand it or anything else, or that we rely on it, but just that we say it.
Don?
Just to go back to this thought about when IA could like spin up, if you're saying that IA could handle the scale that Versionista is at, but not like it's unknown about handling the scale that IA is at, like that wouldn't really be a one-to-one switch, right? Like that would be a pulling back. So, I mean, it seems like there's a lot that kind of would have to be discussed about like a switch from Page Freezer to IA. I'm just wondering like if you have a sense on like next steps or timeline. Also just to say like, Michelle and Matt were offered a Archive It account like that. Like, so there, this is a long time ago, and I can't remember if it was like with Nick Warby, so U of T Libraries, or if it was directly working with Jefferson. But like, what's the model for if it is Archive It or not? Like, are they saying like, oh, also we have this API such that you'll be archiving these stored things? Like, yeah, maybe just circling back to that, because that does seem like to me the most like that seems like the richest vein of a way forward.
My understanding from the last conversation is that it works much like our relationship with Page. Like we don't do archiving ourselves. Like we give them requests and they handle that internally. But maybe I got that wrong. It doesn't sound like he would plan for it to go through Archive It at all. Like it's a totally. I think he even said something along the lines of this is like a totally separate thing. I don't know if you remember better, Rob or Tori.
I don't feel like I have a huge amount of clarity on that. I think like that was more of we need to talk again and get specific. And so like we kind of do need to talk again and get specific and figure out what we need to tell them to get them scraping or crawling at a rate that solves our problems. But then we also need to do the work of making sure that we are able to extract all of that information back out of Internet Archive and put it in our database, because we need to do that regardless. It's the same way that we pull stuff out of Versionista. Dan did some early work on that, but I don't know that it ever got to a point where it was ready to be operationalized. And it certainly isn't currently operational, running on a server, continuously doing it like we are with Versionista. I think the other thing to point out is like while Page Freezer is off and running and archiving stuff that is in no way right now connected to our database, we're not actually using it. It's just sort of there. So if we had Internet Archive running and gathering the same set of things that Versionista is gathering, it's a step back in potential, but it's not necessarily like a step back in what we actually have that's usable. Matt and then Dawn.
Yeah, what we lose is, like I'm a historian, some future historian might want to have all that stuff. Wouldn't it be great if we had it? But we don't lose. We are actively, as advocates, it's unlikely that we're ever going to go back. I think, well, it's not on the horizon right now.
Well, but a lot of this like language searching, like a lot of the analysis that we are actually talking about, even though we certainly haven't begun, does rely on the archives. Like
Yeah.
we're not, and going back to base page, like one thing that does rely on the archives is basically every time we write a report, we go back through old versions and see what's changed. Like,
Yeah. Sure. But I mean, we're talking about an expansion that's not just an expansion moving forward, but would be an expansion looking backwards also at the same time. And when I think about what it would take in terms of labor to be able to do that, unless we actually really have a framework that makes it easy for us to do the analysis, in which case that would be a bummer to lose that. Agreed.
I agree. And I just want to say, like, maybe I misunderstood something you meant, but I do think, like, as Rob was saying, we have Page Freezer in one place, not using it, not storing our database. We'd have Internet Archive in another. So I actually don't even think, like, yes, we, like, from a historian's perspective, we just, you know, one day, 10 years from now, we need to have made sure we did the work to put those all in the same database with the same header information, with everything. But like, so there will be some time in between, which is what I was saying before, that we can't have our different data talk to each other, and that really sucks. But in the future, I think we will be able, like, I don't think there's anything incommensurate about Page Freezer and Internet Archive storage. We should make sure of that. But my assumption, and what Dan and Rob asked at last week's conversation with Mark, led me to believe that everything could be made commensurate. Do you agree with that, Rob?
So what I heard, and so I think based on discussions in Slack, we clearly like heard things slightly differently. What I heard was being commensurate with Versionista, no problem. We can figure out how to make that happen on the IA side, not on the side of us extracting everything from IA. IA can figure out how to make that happen in, you know, like a week or something, or a week or two, you know, once we say, like, here's exactly what we need, go. I heard maybe we can be commensurate with what Page Freezer is doing. Probably we can be commensurate with what Page Freezer is doing. That might take more effort. It will be, and then I heard that it will be hard, and there's a whole lot of open questions about how possible it is and whether it's feasible for them to be commensurate with, like, where we wanted Page Freezer to go, right? Because the capacity that we're using Page Freezer at right now is very small compared to what the goal for it was, which was like scraping a huge amount of stuff. Right now it's sort of crawling, seeded based on the stuff that we're already watching in Versionista, and there's theoretically a larger universe of content that we would want it to start pulling that it's not right now. So there's questions there because we don't know the details. Anyway, done.
Yeah, I just wanted to say quickly, so I've spoken with Jefferson before, to go back to Matt's chat comment about could they store the Page Freezer archives. Like, they seem willing to store at the scale that they're, like, that archive team stuff is, which is comparable, like in the collections of the tens of terabytes over, like, hundreds of items at tens of terabytes in a collection, on their public site data. And Jefferson had talked about that. So yes, I think there's something that could still be pursued. I would say that should probably be talked about with Jefferson. If we're thinking about figuring out how we could move that data somewhere, I mean, and have it stored, but it would be stored, I mean, there would be some work to get it stored in the right way, because those collections are collections of work files, like with indexes and stuff. So there's that as like a separate thing. But it seems like potentially. The other point I had is, and like, this is maybe me just not knowing, but just to flag, I mean, even talking to Jefferson at Web Archiving Week, like, there's like there's like 3 APIs for like Internet Archive. Like, it's kind of gnarly in the back end. So it's like, I would assume it might not be as straightforward as it might initially and optimistically appear. And so the joy actually about the Archive It thing is because that's their paid service. That's the one that they put the most work into. So like I don't know, like, it's just something to flag that, like, when when Brendan and I were just in a very quick conversation, and Brendan had a much fuller one with Jefferson, like, I don't know. I just assume things are complicated.
They are very complicated. And Dan is hyper aware of that. And that's what I was saying. He has some prototypey, maybe semi-operationalized stuff that does do that work, but it's also one of the things he had a boatload of questions for Mark about in the meeting, was like all the things that are gnarly and confusing between those three APIs that we're missing or we don't feel super solid on. And that's why I say like Internet Archive could start doing what we need in a short time period, but then there's the question of us like being able to extract it back out and make it usable, which is like, don't know if we can also do it in that time period or whether it will take longer, because you're right, like there's some gnarly stuff there. And Andrew, did you have something you wanted to?
Yeah, I mean, you can confirm if I'm wrong on this too, Rob, but my understanding was all of these different ways IA does stuff go into the Wayback Machine.
That's what he said. So there's the part of IA that archives like all kinds of other content that's not like web content, where you can pull out like videos and sound files and other things, which is separate. But everything else and all the stuff that's for pay, that like people are paying to get web content archived, goes into the public web archive, and you pull it back out through the same.
You can have private collections, so there's stuff that you can read and index, but you can't actually access the content. And also like the way that our collection, so there is some edgy content that's like the archive. Internet Archive is storing that is not accessible via the Wayback Machine, because what they took was like a group of works. So there are ways that they store stuff that you wouldn't get via the Wayback Machine, and what I'm talking about for the page freezer content would be one of those ways. Like that would be basically like giving them like a collection, a group of files that you can see and interact with via the web interface, but it is not viewable via the Wayback interface.
Yeah. So
you just
that's
talking about data, right? Like, I just meant like anything they collect from their web archiving services. So whether it's from Archiveit or another web archiving.
They still do have some private stuff on Archiveit. So there are some things that their for-profit stuff doesn't show up in there. But that's because like someone's paying for that service and like they want it separate, and they have like restriction to their collection policy. Like we came up on stuff just a couple weeks ago, but it was like by UCLA.
okay. So it sounds like there's more details to work out there for sure. What we talked about with Mark last week was restricted entirely to ways that they could crawl stuff, and that we could trigger them to crawl stuff, which is definitely like super separate from us saying we have a boatload of files that are verifiable to us but not to you, like store them. Which is also a thing they do, but we didn't talk about that at all. So there's a good point. There are more avenues than just the thing that we talked about last week that should be explored, and there's a whole bunch more details that we definitely like need to figure out exactly what we need to ask, and sit down for more than half an hour, have a deeper than super high level conversation about it. So I think there's a salient point here, which is like we thought we would be technologically capable of moving off of Versionista onto PageFreezer in a few weeks, and then we'd have the slow process of like making sure everything was happening good on the other side, and then turning off Versionista. If we're not going to do PageFreezer and we're going to go to Internet Archive, that's not going to happen in that time frame, because there's clearly still all these questions to work out. And then there's the technical side of making it happen. So we should be aware of that, right? We can save some costs on the Google Cloud part by turning off PageFreezer, but that does extend out the time frame for turning off Versionista. Nick?
Could you like explicitly talk about the time frame of what it would take in order to get to Internet Archive? I think you mentioned like 1 week-ish from when we got exactly what we needed to them for one aspect of what Internet Archive could potentially do for us. So just like having a timeline with like all the variables would be really great for like financial planning. Can't even do that yet.
Okay, I will take that as an action item to do, because we don't have a whole lot more time left. Okay. And then I will say that it's super fuzzy because it's based on like us needing to answer more questions with them. So like it's guesses. Totally.
Well, so in terms of order of operation, I mean, I think I see two paths forward, but one is that we start talking to IA and Page Freezer at the same time. We're going to talk to IA as soon as possible. My understanding, we're going to write up the one pager, which we talked about before, and start that conversation. We could right away start initiating conversation with Page Freezer, or given that Dan's not around and he's been kind of more engaged, maybe it's worth waiting for him. And also, hopefully, we can get answers from IA by then, and then have a more informed decision-making kind of process and come to Page Freezer. But what do people think in terms of how to move forward there?
I think that makes sense. I think we all want to be using IA regardless of all the other things. So we should be continuing that conversation the same way. I think it also sounds like there's possible opportunity to shift costs around or get things more efficient with Page Freezer that several of us were entirely unaware of previous to this meeting. So that's also good. And so, Andrew, if you could take point on that, since it sounds like you're the person who knows most about that and has been most in communication with them, that would be awesome. It sounds like we should just talk with them and be honest about like our situation and whether they can do anything to help.
Yeah, I'll just clarify. I think that should come in the form of a phone call. So I'll write a very short note to Michael, and I hope that at least you, Rob, if not everyone else, will be able to attend that phone call. I know it'd be best if Dan could be there, and maybe he can, but I think, Rob, you probably know enough to be able to carry on the conversation as far as I can.
Yeah, okay. So why don't you figure out the basics of that? See if you can get a hold of Dan and figure out whether he might have some time or when he thinks he'll be back and able to devote more time in general. And then we can talk to Page Freezer and figure out how to schedule a call. Dawn?
I mean, I think there's a little bit of tightening up separate from all of the web monitoring stuff that could happen on the Google Cloud side, and it should probably be done. Like, so Superset can be spun down. Dan had a testing machine that might be over provisioned. Like, I know it's like not much, but we might it's money, so we should do it. That seems like a pretty quick to do. And then just as another question, it seems like it would be really valuable maybe for the IA thing to try and figure out how to I know he's busy, but get Jefferson in on whatever your next call is, because he's already spoken to Edgy for a long time. And Matt has I think Matt, you've probably spoken to him the longest, but then Brendan has also spoken to him a fair bit. So to me, it seems like it would be nice to not have two isolated conversations with Edgy. That's my initial sense.
Yeah, we talked about Jefferson. It seems like they talk every day. He almost just wanted a overview, and I'm guessing that one pager will send to both of them. I think we should. Yeah.
What you're just saying there, Don, I think the idea of not having too many edgy conversations is a useful one. And that does, I suppose, make it not a bad idea that maybe I am on that call since I go to the Data Together meetings, although I'm not around much after the next couple of days. So maybe there's Dawn could go to the meeting, or I don't know who else really crosses, maybe Pat or someone.
Okay.
They are pretty different. I think we should talk to the same people and not imagine that we're not talking about two different things. But I don't think each conversation has to be about, but they're different topics. They'll be work on ways. IA will have different provisions for them and things, right? I think we should just imagine that they're two ongoing projects that we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, totally. I guess my point though is just because of the connection over the archiving work, we have these previous possibilities that were mentioned with IA that seem like they could be brought to bear here. That to me is what's valuable, not saying, okay, we have a call where we sort of say 30 minutes for X project, 30 minutes for Y project. Just the fact that there's a history, I think, is helpful.
I totally agree. That's the whole point of this space, is to make sure that we're not, crossing wires, or, when we work with external orgs or whatever, the two different projects or different people that are cross involved aren't winding up having two conversations with another org about basically the same thing. So that's good. So the other action item in there was all the small things that we can spin down on Google Cloud. Pat, have you talked with Sinal about whether that service is cut downable on cloud, the Superset service?
I'm like 99% sure, but I just opened the GitHub issue and mentioned both of you and Don into it. But basically mentioned everyone who had access to actually do the deleting. So yeah, just waiting on him to confirm.
Okay, cool. When he confirms that, we can do that. Andrew.
I just want to clarify, Matt, like, again, I'm sorry that those notes took a while, but I think that it doesn't need to be more than the note. Is that, do you still feel comfortable or have the time to try to take a crack at that one pager, or would you like someone else to do it?
I might have some time today, so if I haven't done anything by the end of the day, then probably someone else should go.
Okay, my guess is it should be not me or Tully, and it should be like Rob, but I mean, I could probably do it and then leave blanks for like the numbers. And the one thing I didn't respond to, but that Rob brought up, is like why I keep giving the number of like tens of millions. And I don't know, like that comes from two sources, and I can talk about it now or later if you want. But it isn't just a random number. And it mostly comes from Michael Reddick. So like that's, I feel like that's a reliable source.
Okay, let's talk about it more on Slack later, because we've been at this for like an hour. We're at like double what we're trying to do. So I think we're clear on like what needs to happen here, at least as much as we know for now. Are we good on the IA page freezer stuff, Nick?
The one thing that I was unclear about what was brought up when Michelle popped into the thread was that we were also relying on page freezer for diffing. Is that right?
Sort of. So Page Freezer also has a diffing service, and we were looking at making use of that. I don't think any of the diffing stuff we've written since has wound up relying on it, because it turned out to be super duper unbelievably slow. And we thought once we had the install running in Google Cloud locally and only we were making use of it, it might be faster, and it's not.
Thank you.
Definitely the word rely is not right. It was like something we we're considering, but it's not a reliance.
Great. Thank you for the clarification.
Yep. Okay. So super quickly, Nick, you had some stuff about sort of grant allocations and whether we can move costs around. Is there anything worth talking about quickly there? What do we need to do?
Yeah, I think we can just touch on it. I just wanted to, before coming to a Climate Central meeting where we have outside partners, I wanted to raise the possibility that both of you, like Andrew and Tully, have already raised about allocating some of the $15,000 to support non-staff costs, but to support the software storage processing costs, and see how we can sort of further that along. Is that okay to bring up?
So we, at the last meeting, Andrew actually brought this up with James, and Heather, who was kind of managing the Packard and our relationship, basically implied that this is just possible.
That was like months ago.
That was months ago. James, I don't think he has as good of a sense, but he says, I don't see why not. He's going to check with his, with people at Climate Central about this.
The person who replaced her, Heather left, but he's going to check with the person who replaced her.
And we didn't say like, just the possibility of having that option is what we're asking for right now. And then if it's possible, then we'll know it's on the table.
I mean, he basically said it's possible, and the thing he really wanted to check in on is like, what's the right approach to updating them? I mean, he almost even said like, maybe we wouldn't even have to update them, but he said probably just to be safe, we would send them a note explaining whatever, a half page, like these costs that were allocated for Tully in the grant, that work is actually continuing otherwise, and we actually have a more dire need for those costs this way. And James basically felt like that happens all the time in other grants that they have with Packard, and that would be totally normal. I mean, if we were changing like the website monitoring project manager, and we were like messing with that, that would be surprising and weird, I think. But this is like a smaller cost that I think is much more fungible this way.
Okay, great. I think the other thing I would be an advocate for is also if we could not just be thinking about like the storage and processing costs being covered by Packard, but also Versionista. And
I don't think they differentiate,
Yeah, I
honestly.
think we could have.
Yeah.
We should be clear, but I just don't think that it's like a different. I mean, yeah, if other people want to answer what they think of that, but in terms of possibility, I don't think there's any significant difference.
Great. Yeah, I just wanted to put that by y'all first, because it is a lot of money, and we're really depleting our discretionary funds. So sorry for taking up so much time.
No, that's important and super helpful. Okay, and then I think we kind of covered all the Google Cloud cost issues in the whole page views in our archive conversation. Is there anything I'm missing there? Dawn?
I just wanted to check in on that spreadsheet that we were gonna work on or something. So I think it's still this one, but maybe I found the wrong one. So I added some notes to it, but I realized I couldn't budget it. And it's not really just about web monitoring. So we really can postpone this till next week, I think, unless it's urgent. But I think Nick and Pakon and Matt, we need to talk about some of the edgy infra costs, not web monitoring costs. So just that Heroku thing. But I don't want to take up more time on this call. I just wanted to make sure that that's still the spreadsheet we're supposed to be coordinating around. Is there somewhere else?
Is that the right one, Matt? Because I feel like that was you who was owning that. Maybe I'm remembering wrong.
Sorry. Yeah, to call it a spreadsheet is almost a little bit of a joke, but yes, that's the one. There's nothing better.
Okay, I know there's also the, I think there was a HackMD, or maybe it was a paper doc that had Google Cloud costs specifically. And
That was the HackMD doc that we had before.
Okay, I think both that one and this one, I kept meaning to add all the costs I listed out in Slack a couple weeks ago, and I have failed to do that, so I should get on that. Pat?
Sorry, I preempted. I actually just needed access to that, so the link is in. The link's in chat right now. The HackMD was migrated to paper, so if anyone wants to check it out.
Good to know. I didn't know that it was migrated to paper. Okay, and then stuff about the PM job posting. Andrew?
I was just going to say, when we talked about this at the beginning, I think my understanding is Nick talked about it on Monday and we actually get the answer then, or do you think we get the answer like a week from Monday?
I can ask her now. I usually have like 15 or 20 questions for her that come over the week, and I try and like put it all into one little conversation for like an hour on a Monday morning. But I'll send it to her now, and then hopefully we'll have the answer then, because often I'll raise a question on Monday and I'll have the answer on Friday. So I'll raise it now.
If you think it's uncomfortable or annoying to ask in advance, then I would say don't. But if you think that's fine and you would actually have the answer on Monday, I think fine, unless anyone disagrees. I think we can all make sure that the posting, where to post, etc., are done by then, except for this question. Although obviously, where to post is to some extent affected by this because there are certain messages will probably be shown. But
that sounds good. I'll also be in touch with you about the money, because it hasn't come in yet for various reasons. So I'm in a chain of emails with Shannon and Steve about like actually getting the money. That's a different issue. I think it'll come in this week. But yeah.
That's frustrating because I feel like we took enough time to respond to them about the contract that they should have had that like one click away, right? But, okay. Thank you.
Clearly, there's like some other stuff that we have to make sure we get worked out in parallel with the question about whether we can hire non-US citizens. Is there anything else we need to cover here? Or should we do all the rest of that in Slack or in Google Docs? All right.
Yeah, just I was gonna say Slack and or make sure like Michelle is involved in that conversation.
Okay. Yes, let's all make sure that we pick up and focus on that Slack channel and actually get it done. And I think that's it for this. I'm sorry this has dragged on to like an hour and 10 minutes. Cool. See you all next week.
Thank you, y'all. This is super clarifying.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Always nice.